Good morning. The message that I want to give to you this morning really served as the genesis for my initial thoughts for what has become Epic Church. And here was the deal. It was November 2008. I was going to teach through Esther's story out of the Bible like I'm going to do this morning. And my hope, my prayer, my aim that morning is that the church that I was serving in at the time, my hope was that God might launch some new things in the hearts of people there. And lo and behold, God launched some new things in my heart that day. And it was really that message that really served as the genesis for what we now sit in this morning. So November 2008, that was my hope, that I would give a message and that people sitting in a crowd like you would, like this, because I just prepare messages for you. It's never for me. And so, kidding, all right? I'm just joking. You're the ones who need it. And so that was my hope that morning, that there might be people sitting in seats like you're sitting in this morning, and there would be something that would just begin to prompt within their heart, and they would go, you know what, I need to make a next faith step. And lo and behold, it was my heart that God was launching something new in, and it's cool that we get to sit in some of that this morning because He has fulfilled some of His promises that began really that November morning. And so I'm glad that you're here. My hope for you is that God might stir something fresh within you. For some of you, it might be like this huge thing. For others of you, it might just be a next step in a relationship, or it might be the next step in growing in your character or your integrity, or it might be something that you need to do differently with your finances. I don't know. I've been hearing back from small groups this week, people asking the question, so Ben, what if it's not a next big thing for me? Well, we have different seasons of life, right? Sometimes God is pruning something in us. Sometimes God is preparing us for something. Sometimes we're in a season of celebration. But sometimes we're just living life, and things come along, and then we rise to the occasion as God prompts us. And that's more along the lines of what we'll see from Esther's story this morning. Esther's story takes place in somewhere between 480 and 460 BC, so a couple thousand years ago. And what's going on in her story, the setting is set in Susa, which is the capital of the Persian Empire, the Persian kingdom. So it's set in Susa, and if you'll remember, I know it was 7 days ago, but it's where Nehemiah's story began too. I know nobody remembers that, but anyway, a lot of confidence for the speaker here. Same place, the capital of the Persian Empire is where Esther's story takes place, and there's a king involved, like there is in much of our rejecting status quo messages, and his name is King Ahasuerus. It might say in your Bible translation, or it may say Xerxes. This is Xerxes the First, or King Ahasuerus. That's what it says in the ESV that I'll be reading from in just a moment. And so he's the king. There's a queen named Vashti, and one night the king is throwing this massive party, like just crazy, crazy party. All of his friends are there and many, many people, and he asked Queen Vashti to do some things that she did not feel comfortable doing. She rejected his offer, and what that rejection led to was essentially her being fired as the queen. Okay, so that's kind of what happened. She was told never to approach or come before the king again, and they were declaring that we're going to get someone else to take her position, and the Bible literally says we're going to get someone who's better than she. And so when a king doesn't have a queen, how's he to operate, right? Now, guys, if you were the king, how would you go find your next queen? Here's what he does. He gets his officials to go throughout all of the provinces in the kingdom and to bring back to him all of the most beautiful young virgins that exist in the kingdom. And then he'll kind of do a beauty competition thing, just wanting to know their heart, not wanting to know what they look like in a swimsuit or anything like that. And basically, they're all going to come back, and then the king's going to make a decision. I want her to be the queen, or I want her to be the queen. And so this is where we're introduced to Esther, hence the book of the Bible that it's named after. Esther is one of these beautiful young ladies. In fact, the Bible says, yes, the Bible, the thing that you're like, oh, it's such a boring book. The Bible says she had an amazing figure and was lovely to look at. Okay? The Bible. So that's who Esther is. That's how she gets the attention of the officials who are looking for the next queen. And along with all of these other women, Esther is invited to participate essentially in this beauty competition. Now, what we're told about Esther also is that she had neither a father nor a mother, and that her relative Mordecai, big player in the story we're going to share in a minute, her relative Mordecai was very instrumental in her life. Essentially served probably as a guardian for her, and was just like that. He was, from what the text tells us, he was her family. No mom, no dad, not sure what happened, but Mordecai is responsible for and living life connected to Esther. And so all of these ladies come before the king, and guys, don't raise your hand, but some of you in this room think that your significant other takes way too long getting ready, okay? Don't point, don't raise your hand. But I'm going to make you think your significant other, guys, your ladies in your life, they are exceptionally fast. Guess how long the women who were part of this thing for the king, guess how long they took to get ready for the king? A couple hours? A whole night? 12 months. Your girl is fast, all right? Your girl is exceptionally fast. Even if she takes 2 hours and has 5 outfits on the bed because she can't figure out what the moon's doing tonight and how the shade will show up when you guys are dancing. I mean, whatever it is. They take 12 months. Check it out. 6 months of oil and myrrh, 6 months of something else, 12 months to get ready. And finally, their time comes, and Esther's time comes for her to go before the king. And it says about Esther that the king loved her more than all of the others, which has you to begin thinking, okay, is that just randomly that he chose her? Is there something bigger going on behind the story? But he chooses her. She finds favor in the king's eyes. He chooses Esther, and she becomes the king's queen. About the same time, there's a man named Haman, and he was given the top spot underneath the king. He was the main official. And do you know anyone in your life, again, don't point, but do you know anyone in your life with a huge ego? Anybody? Like massive ego? They've got a lot of insecurities, kind of the little man syndrome or whatever the case may be. And Haman was kind of like this. He needed to feel significant. He needed approval. And so there was this law that went out that anytime Haman showed up, you bowed down to him. And amazingly enough, everyone in the kingdom bowed down to Haman. That is, everyone except for Mordecai. Instead of Haman just trying to punish Mordecai, he wants to punish all of Mordecai's people, the entire nation, the entire people group that Mordecai is a part of. Well, you might know this, but Mordecai is a Jew. And so what Haman wants to do, and no one knows that Esther is a Jew at this time, okay, otherwise things would get dicey quick. What Haman wants to do is he wants to allow the king to basically sign off on his proposal that all the Jews be destroyed, killed, annihilated. That's how the text reads it. In my mind, it's like, hey, destroyed, that's enough. No, destroyed, killed, if that's not enough, annihilated. And so the king signs off on it. Mordecai gets the rumor about, hey, this is going to go down, and the Jews are going to be destroyed. And what's interesting for Mordecai, being the kind of devout Jew that he was, he knew God's history in moments like this. He knew the promise God had made and had fulfilled to Abraham, that you would have many offspring. He knew that God had rescued the Jews when they were enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. He knew those things. And so when this comes about, Mordecai begins to think, wait a minute, how is God going to deliver our people this time? Esther's the queen. She's the queen. The king's just signed off. We're about to be murdered. Our people group's about to be extinct. What is going on here? And he begins to think, Esther has access to the king that no one else has. And so he begins to awaken Esther to the reality of what's about to go down. And what happens is Esther essentially tells Mordecai, hold on. The king hasn't called for me for some 30 days. And if I approach the king without his invitation, without being summoned by the king, then what he can do is kill me. That's the legal penalty. It's death. She tells Mordecai that. Now, what I want you to see is the ensuing conversation between Mordecai and Esther. We're in Esther chapter 4. If you need a Bible to follow along, raise your hands. We would love to give you one of these Bibles, and if you need a different one later, we can connect you with that, especially if you do not own a Bible. We'd love to give you a nicer one even than you're receiving today. Raise your hands, and we'll get you a Bible this morning, and I'll tell you what page it's on, and you can follow along, or some of you, I know you have Bible on your smartphone, iPad, Some of you just want to watch the screen. You lost an hour of sleep last night, whatever the reason is, you're good. Esther chapter 4, we'll start in verse 12. Would you all stand with me? We're on page 264 if you have a copy of the Bibles that Epic gifts out. And so, Mordecai and Esther, they're kind of going back and forth, and there's some intermediaries that are having the communication for them. So Esther would tell Mordecai this. Mordecai would tell these intermediaries, tell Esther this. So that's what you're going to be walking into. But what's just happened is Esther just said, hey, it's been 30 days. He hasn't asked. He hasn't summoned me. And so if I go, 12 through 17 of chapter 4, and these people told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, all of them, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. You may be seated. What happens if you do nothing with what God has given you? What happens if you and I absolutely do nothing with what God has given us? While you cannot stop God from accomplishing what He wants, you can forfeit and walk away from your part in what He does. Okay? Just so we understand, God is not bowing down to us. Okay? Everybody clear? We do not have authority over Him. The purposes and plans of the Lord ultimately will not be thwarted. He's going to do His thing. The question is sometimes, will we get in on what He does? While you cannot stop God from accomplishing what He wants, you absolutely can forfeit your part in what He does. Does Esther have the choice to remain silent? Does she have the choice not to rock the boat? Does she have a choice to maintain the status quo? Does Esther have an option to make her queenship all about her queenship? You have the choice to do nothing also. You have the choice not to use the gifts and skills that God has bestowed upon you for the purposes with which He's given them to you for. You have the opportunity not to use your platform for the reasons that God has given you the platform. You have your opportunity not to leverage your influence for the reason that God has handed you the influence. You have an opportunity not to use the wealth God has given to you. Yes, God has given to you. You have the choice not to use it on things that He cares about. Esther could have remained silent. Look at how Mordecai tells her. In verse 13, he's like, do not think you're a Jew, Esther. This is for all the Jews. He's telling her, they're going to find out who you are. Esther, they're going to find out that you're a Jew, and the law doesn't exclude the queen if she happens to be a Jew. They're going to find out. And then he says this, Esther, you need to know, if you stay silent, you will forfeit your part in what God's up to, but God will arise relief and deliverance from somewhere else. You see that? Listen, Esther, you have an opportunity here to play a part. If you stay silent, deliverance is coming from elsewhere. Rescue is coming from elsewhere. Remember this, Mordecai, he knew the story of God throughout history. He knew God's faithfulness to Abraham to make him a father when, as the text said a few weeks ago, he was well past, like he was as good as dead. Not an encouraging word for you as a man, right? He's as good as dead. He knew that God had been faithful to bring the Israelites out of their slavery in Egypt. And so Mordecai seems to have this deep-seated belief, this great faith that says, listen, Esther, you have an opportunity to play a part in this. But if you refuse, God's still going to bring this about. The question for us usually is not, will God make this thing happen? The question oftentimes is, will you and I get to play a part of it? May I not be so arrogant to think that if I choose not to play God's part in what he does at Epic Church and through our city, may I not be so arrogant to know that God can easily, through a variety of methods, remove me and bring someone in because he's going to accomplish something. You need to understand, no matter how gifted you are in your thing, do not be so arrogant to think that if you don't respond to God, that, it's never going to happen, okay? I know you're God's gift to the world, but do not pretend that God's thing rests on your shoulders alone. But here's the beautiful part throughout history, throughout the Bible, throughout this church's short existence, even right here, God's giving us an opportunity to participate. He's inviting us in. He's letting us know, hey, the way I want to do this, I want to give you gifts and passions so that you might use them for the sake of my kingdom. There's a reason you have the platform you do. There's a reason you have the gifts you do. There's a reason you have the wealth that you do. There's a reason you're connected to the people that you're connected with. There is a reason. But if you refuse to use what I've given you, if you walk away from the gifts I've handed to you, you're the one who loses. And I think one of the greatest fears of my life and your life should be missing out on the thing or things that God wants us to be a part of. You're like, Ben, I didn't think we should have fears. This is a good, healthy one. You should be afraid to go to the end of your days and look back and have missed out on what God wanted you to use, what he wanted you to see, what he wanted you to be a part of, what he wanted you to leverage for the sake of something bigger than yourself. Some questions. Why do you have what you have right now? You're like, Ben, this isn't my favorite season of life. Didn't ask that. Why do you have what you have right now? Why are you moved by certain things right now? Another way to ask it, and this won't be true for everyone, but for some of you, why do you think God is expanding your platform right now? I don't have all the answers for you, but just think about that. For those of you that are doing that, and some of you are like, Ben, my platform is so small, if I don't stand up with 1 foot, I fall off. I didn't say how big is your platform. But if your platform begins to expand, if it's expanding in this season of life, why do you think that's happening? If your influence and the level of your influence is being increased, why do you think it's being increased now? Mordecai wants to help Esther see, Esther, there's a reason why you have this moment. There's a reason why this is coming your way. There's a reason why you are the queen right now. If you look at the end of verse 14, if you know anything about Esther's story, this is kind of where the verse that gets highlighted a lot. It's a powerful, powerful verse. It's why it's part of our text. But look at the last sentence in verse 14. Mordecai says to her, and who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Now, what Esther probably wanted Mordecai to say, and what we want people in our life to say is, I've heard from God, this is exactly how it's going to happen, and here's the result, and then we'll move forward, right? When the business is automatically funded, somebody guarantees us that, it takes a lot of faith to start the business, right? When it's obvious what the relationship's going to do and how it's going to end, very easy, but then we throw away faith. Mordecai doesn't say, Esther, I've heard a clear word from God, and this is how this will go down. Do not be afraid. Here's what he says. And some of you need to just get comfortable with this kind of language. Mordecai basically says, Esther, perhaps this will happen. You see it? Who knows? Mordecai, I need a little more confidence than that, right? Esther, who knows? Mordecai is thinking, though. I hope you have some people in your mind, in your life who think about things that you can't see just with your human eyes. People that are away from the situation and can speak into your life, and they're seeing this move and that move and this come together like a puzzle, and we can't always see it. I hope you have people saying to you things like, hey, it just seems to me. This is what Mordecai's saying. It just seems to me, Esther, that perhaps this is why you're the queen. And then he backs up that, you have to think, and then he's thinking, and perhaps this is even why you're beautiful. She probably thought her beauty was just luck of the draw. She probably thought she was chosen to be the queen because she had all the goods. When you think about your life, are you just looking surface stuff? Are you thinking beyond what you can see? Beyond what's present? Mordecai's helping her think. Oh, Esther, this isn't about you being the queen. This is your moment. And he's just saying to her, I do not think you're here by accident. And as your pastor, I want to say it to you. Please don't think you're here by accident. Here where, Ben? Here alive? Here 2013? Here San Francisco? Here Epic Church? Wherever your here is. Please, and this is not like some pep talk. It's just me telling you that I want you to, with me, to have this deep belief that God doesn't do things randomly or accidentally. And Mordecai is trying to speak this into Esther's life. He's like, who knows? Like maybe this is your moment in history, Esther. Maybe this is what God has been brewing all along. Maybe this is the moment and this is the purpose. Do you assume your life is only about your life or about something bigger? And depending on what's going on in your life, and even for me, there's times where life just becomes survival, right? You're working ungodly hours. The people that are supposed to be there for you aren't. The pressure is intensified at work. And so I get it. Sometimes it's hard to think about anything besides my life, right? Don't stay in that season too long. If you're in there today, I want to encourage you to get out of that. I want to encourage you to remove yourself and to begin to go, wait. I'm not just working a job just to work a job, and I'm not just getting money just to get money, and I'm not just living in my neighborhood just to live in this neighborhood, and I'm not just a part of this church just to be a part of this church. I'm not just in San Francisco to live in San Francisco. I want you to step away and go, why am I here, and why do I have what I have? Do you assume that your life is only about your life or about something bigger? It would have been easy for Esther to go, this is all about me being the queen. Period. Right? Real easy to do that. This is just about me being me. Or is it something bigger? And she's getting ready to go for it, and she says, I want you to hold a 3-day fast on my behalf. What she's saying is, I'm going for it. But I do not want to go for it without us tapping into what God's up to. Some of us are such, including your pastor, quick responders, that when we get the idea, we want to run, right? You guys know I'm awesome when it comes to patience. I want to run. Here's the idea. Why not today? Esther understood what was at stake. If you're going to reject status quo, let me say it this way. Do not enter a rejecting status quo mode for your life if prayer isn't coming with it. You're like, Ben, it doesn't mention prayer. You can bet, just knowing how the Jews responded when they're fasting, they're praying. When they're withdrawing from food, they're doing so that they might invite God into what's going on. And so that's what she wants. She doesn't want to approach the king flippantly. She doesn't want to just hear a good speech and go for it. She wants God to be in the midst of what's going on. You see the same thing with Nehemiah's life last week, right? Do not enter a rejecting status quo mode in your life if you will not bring prayer along with it. You can't handle it. You're not spiritual enough, you're not old enough, you're not young enough, you're not rich enough, you're not educated enough. If God's going to move in some powerful way and do something only He could do, you aren't sufficient for it. Tap in, lean in, invite Him in. Moses knew. He said to God, God, if you do not go with us, I cannot go. If your presence doesn't come with me, I'm not in this. It's not a bad line for our lives. God, if you're not doing this, I don't want any part of it. The idea being, if Esther didn't have God in the midst of what she's about to do, I think death for her is certainty. We know how the king treated his last queen, right? Right? We know what his MO is. We know what the plan is for queens who do things that they're not allowed to do. Esther knows that's at stake. And then Mordecai, listen, I believe deeply that God can do anything He wants to do, including help that baby out in the back wall. Poor thing. I believe God can do absolutely anything. I do. But what I love is all throughout the pages of the scriptures and all throughout history and all throughout my own personal life, and I think yours, He uses other people in our lives to do things that He wants us to do. Where would Esther have been without Mordecai? Where would Esther have been if she had the wrong Mordecai? Right? What if Mordecai was all about Esther's safety? That would have been logical. She didn't have parents. He's responsible for her. What if he's just like, no, her dad and mom aren't alive. I could never live this down if something happened to her. That would be a logical response, just to be honest, as a dad. Right? As a guardian, that's logical. He could have done that. But instead he says to Esther, Esther, this could be your time. Let me ask you this. Who is your Mordecai? Who are the people, or who is the person that gets to speak most deeply into your life? And if you have the wrong Mordecai, you can bet that you will live a life maintaining the status quo. Who's your Mordecai? Who gets to speak deeply into what's happening? Who gets to do it? Are they leading you towards easy life, comfortable life, or a life filled with faith? Is it a friend that gets to be your Mordecai? I have a lot of friends. Okay, I have a few friends. They don't all get equal weight. You with me? It's not a majority. It's not a vote. There are certain people that I feel like are tapped into who God is and tapped into being willing to challenge me and encourage me. If you're just going to encourage me without challenge, wrong Mordecai. If you get challenged without encouragement, wrong Mordecai. When you get people in your life who are tapped into who God is, what He's wanting, are willing to trust Him, and are willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with you, right Mordecai. Maybe it's a staff member here at our church. Maybe it's one of our Epic Groups leaders that's over your group. Maybe it's a team leader. I don't know who it is, but who is your Mordecai? Do you have anyone speaking into the processes, into the faith, into the praying that you're doing in your life? Maybe it's a significant other. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's a mentor. Who's speaking into your life? Mordecai. He awakened something within Esther. It's like this oh yeah moment, right? Let's be honest. When we're in the midst of something, isn't it hard for us to see stuff? Like you see what's terrible about everyone else's relationship, but not yours, right? Like, I can't believe you're still with him. But you can't see what's going on in yours. Invite people with eyes. Eyes of faith, not just to see what's on the surface, but to see what's below it. Invite people in who can see. Who's your Mordecai? And to flip the question, here's a great one. Whose Mordecai are you? Who is your Mordecai? But whose Mordecai are you? And you may say to me, Ben, I've not even been a Christian for long. Should I be anyone's Mordecai? It's a development process. I believe that. As you gain in wisdom, then you have wisdom to share. But let me ask this. If the people whose lives you're speaking deeply into, if they take your advice and your wisdom, will it be likely that they live a life maintaining the status quo or rejecting it? Will it be likely they live a life filled with faith or a life filled with doubt? If people take your advice, your wisdom, what does it look like for them on the other side? So who is your Mordecai? Who is the confidence builder in your life? Not confidence in you and how awesome you are, okay? Though you're great. Confidence in God, how awesome He is, how He's wired you, what He wants to do in your life, how He wants you to contribute to society, how He wants you to impact the world. Who's your Mordecai? Well, where do we begin? A few thoughts. Start with where you are. This is the only place any of us can start, right? We talk a lot about next steps here at Epic. You can't start anywhere but where you are today. Start with where you are. Start with what you have. Some of you may be, you know what, Ben, I don't have much. It's okay, I didn't ask that. Start with what you do have. What gifts you have, what experience you do have. Start with what moves you deeply. Start with the current platform and level of influence you have. So you're in an entry-level position. Okay, it might not be much platform, much influence, use what you have. So you're a stay-at-home mom. You have significant influence. So you're leading in your industry or in your company or somewhere along the org chart, you're leading. Use the platform. Use the influence that God has bestowed upon you. Whatever it might be. Whatever it might be. Use what God has given you. You know, it's hard for me to get into Esther's story without thinking about the story of Jesus himself. Jesus was dead set on mission, just like Esther came to be dead set on mission. A little bit of a difference where Esther says, hey, I'm going to the king, I'm hopeful. But if I die, I die. Jesus, when it comes to his mission, he knows he's going to die. Okay, it's not, there's nothing perhaps at that point. God isn't saying to Jesus, who knows, maybe this is your moment. No, Jesus knows this is my moment. I have come to lay down my life so that people might find true life. And in a minute, I'm going to pray, and we'll begin to worship some more. You can pray where you are, and then we'll take communion. We'll just head down our aisles and line up along this wall, and you'll be served the elements, the bread representing the body of Jesus, dipped into the cup representing the blood of Christ that's been spilled for us, for the forgiveness of our sins, the scriptures say. But before we get there, let me just say a few things. Some of you I've known a really long time. Most of you I've known less than 2 years, and others of you I have never met. You keep eluding me somehow. But just for the next couple of minutes, could I just be your Mordecai? Is now the time for something for you? Is now the time to step across the line of faith in Jesus? You've been coming to our church or other churches. You have friends that have talked to you about Christ. You sense like, okay, I've got the answers, but I don't have all of them. And sometimes we think we have to have all the answers before we move in faith in Jesus for the first time. Listen, if that's true, none of us move. I don't have all the answers for you, for faith, for the Bible. I don't have them. But it's today your day to move forward in faith. It's today your day to take a next step, and you heard us talk about baptism, and that's your next thing. Like, Ben, I don't know, I was baptized as an infant. Well, that's very valuable. One of the things the scriptures clearly teach is that adults were baptized after they came to faith. Just to announce to the community, the world that's watching, my life has been transformed by Jesus. It takes courage. I know that. That's what we're talking about. Is that for you? Is the next step for you to walk away from something familiar or to start something new? Is your next step to change the way that you're entering into and exiting out of certain relationships? You've made it a cyclical thing, and now you need to. It needs to change. Is today the day that you start to forgive someone that hurt you? I know they crushed your spirit. I know it hurt deeply. But is today the day that Christ wants to set you free from it, and you can set them free from it? Is today the day that you begin to change and become generous when you think about allocating your time, your resources, your gifts? As I said, it might not be a huge thing for every one of us in the room, but I want to give you 3 questions that applies to every human being in this room. Here they are. The first one is this: what have you been given? Applies to every one of us. What have you been given? Number 2, maybe my favorite question of this: what's the point of it? What have you been given? What's the point of it? Is it just for you, your pleasure, your comfort? And thirdly, what will you do with it? Every one of us can think about these questions. There's not one person in this room these questions do not apply to. What have you been handed? Or what have you been given? What's the point of it? Is it aimless? Is it random? Is it coincidental? What's the point of it? What will you do with it? I know this isn't like something we can maybe figure out in the next few minutes, but I do think it's a great exercise for this week to think through these 3 questions. You'll flesh it out in your groups this week. What have I been given? What's the point? Like the why? What will we do with it? Would you pray with me today as we enter into this communion time and